contemplation. It is the normal yearning of the human animal. And according to Becker, the way that culture provides us with opportunities to feel valuable is through social roles with associated standards of appropriate conduct, the satisfaction of which allows you to perceive yourself as a significant individual in a world of meaning. And when you perceive yourself as such, then he says that you have self-esteem, which is a critical core concept for Becker. One more idea, and then we can really get going in terms of doing some research, and that's just one little twist, and that is, how does this idea, or how do these ideas help us understand the question that I raised at the outset of this missive, and that is why people can't get along with folks that are different than themselves. And in this regard, and as some of you already know, what Becker says is, you know what? If I'm right, if your beliefs about the nature of reality serve a death-denying function, then there's always going to be psychological difficulties whenever you encounter someone who doesn't share those beliefs. Because to the extent that you accept an alternative conception of reality, welcome, how are you? Take one, please. To the extent that you accept the validity of an alternative conception of reality, you necessarily do so by undermining the confidence with which you subscribe to your own beliefs, and the minute you do that, expose yourself, at least in principle, welcome, to the overwhelming anxiety those beliefs were erected to minimize in the first place. And I know this is familiar territory for some, but for those of you that are new to these ideas, just a couple of head shakes. Is this okay so far? Just in terms of conceptual clarity. So for Becker, and then he goes on, if I could just say one other thing, to say that, well, when we run into people who are different, unhappily, the way that we tend to react is to start by berating or belittling them. And then what we try to do is to get them to dispose of their ideas and adopt ours instead. And if that doesn't work, we just kill them, thus proving that our ideas and our God are right after all. That's Becker in a nutshell. I hope that I've done not a major disservice to his ideas, except to note that at best that was a caricature of a stereotype of decades of careful scholarship in which he painstakingly integrates what I would consider to be some of the most important ideas of literally thousands of years of Western and Eastern thought. And if I've piqued your interest just a little bit so that you go and give a shot at reading Becker directly, then I'm already successful. I can get on the plane in a couple of minutes. But I hope I can do more than that. If you work with me now, let's turn the page and go to page 2 and take a look at just some research that we've done. Some of you have heard my tale before. I got interested in Becker's ideas in 1980, and I started talking at conferences all over the world. My buddies Tom and Jeff and I, we wrote a paper where we tried to present Becker's ideas to academic psychologists, and we really didn't get anywhere. Our paper was rejected at every psychology journal. You can have this one. Thanks, sir. There should be some others. I'm sorry. There may be a few others, or if there's extras floating around. Yeah, it'd be very helpful if you have this piece of paper. All right, to make a short story long, we tried to write about Becker's ideas, and we sent our first paper to a journal called The American Psychologist, where it was rejected with a single-line review. I have no doubt that these ideas are of no interest whatsoever to any psychologist, alive or dead. So anyway, and my buddies Jeff and Tom, they were like, they didn't like it. And I was like, no, they want us. They're being caught. The brashness of youth. No, I was like, no, they want us. Now, it turns out they didn't want us because for 10 years, this same paper was rejected at every journal. I think even Mad Magazine rejected it. And finally, frankly, what happened is that we were talking to the president of the American Psychological Association. We said, hey, surely these ideas are at least worthy of the consideration of academic psychologists, to which he replied, if they are worthy, then you should cough up some evidence. I know some of you have been trained in the sciences, who's got a background in science. For better or worse, scientists have this annoying need for proof. And in retrospect, I think that's a good idea. And we're like, oh, now I remember why we have PhDs in experimental social psychologists. We design experiments. And so what we've done literally for about 25 years is to design and conduct experiments that we believe provides a very compelling body of empirical evidence in support of the central tenets of Ernest Becker's ideas. We call our effort to render his work testable terror management theory. Doesn't matter what you call it. And what I want to do is to just bounce very quickly through a few things. Very quickly, the first thing that we did was a series of studies to demonstrate that self-esteem serves an anxiety buffering function. According to Becker, self-esteem is the psychological mechanism by which culture exerts its anxiety-reducing function. And to the extent that that's true, what we should be able to do is to show that. Now, I'm already going to overstay my welcome if I don't keep myself focused. If we had some more time, I would someday, maybe Neil will let me back yet one more time and we can talk about self-esteem. Who's heard that there's some controversy these days about self-esteem not being all it's cracked up to? Narcissism's not all it's cracked up to. Self-esteem, which is very, very different than narcissistic self-inflation, is every bit as important, I would argue, as Becker originally proclaimed. In fact, we did a series of studies where we hooked people up to a physiograph machine and we told them that they were going to receive painful electrical shocks, which, ethical concerns aside, is a very effective way of making people tremendously anxious. And what we demonstrated was that momentary elevations in self-esteem not only made people feel better, but it reduced physiological arousal in anticipation of painful electrical shocks. Right, forget about that for now. More important for our purposes is what we call the mortality salience paradigm. And where we really got stuck for several years was trying to figure out how we were going to test Becker's main claim that your beliefs about the nature of reality have something to do with the denial of death. One of the reasons why Becker was so reviled in academic communities was that people just said, this is psychoanalytic mumbo-jumbo, it can't be tested, and therefore it must be wrong. Who remembers being told that Freud must be nonsense because it's untestable? In fact, it is nonsense, some of it, but not because it's necessarily untestable. Freud was annoying, as you know, because he said, hey, either you agree with me or you don't, in which case you're repressing and I'm right. So am I right or am I right? Well, you can't have it both ways. And so a lot of people said, well, you know, Becker's ideas, those are provocative, but there's no way that they could be tested. And I must say that the one thing that I believe that we've added to this enterprise that enriches by corroborating Becker's ideas is this little mortality salience paradigm. Because we were sitting around one day and we had an accident. A thought struck us. We were in our lab and we're like, okay, well, let's think about this. If Becker's right, if your beliefs about the nature of reality serve a death-denying function, then what might happen if we ask people to think about themselves dying? And our logic is that what should happen is that you should need the anxiety buffering properties of your beliefs even more than you ordinarily would under conditions of what we now call mortality salience. And that should be reflected by exaggerated evaluations of the people around you as a function of the extent to which they either share or differ from you with regard to cherished beliefs. So our thought is that if Becker's on the right track, and if we ask people to think about dying, they should like other people that are similar more than they would otherwise.